Ah, good day, everyone. Welcome to another Destiny movie night hangout. I'm your host, Mike, and the movie hangout here tonight is The Good Lie. I'm here with the wonderful guest, Yogan.
Hey
Hi, Yogan.
everyone, finally we're having this.
Yes, this hangout has been on postponement for a number of weeks. I'm broadcasting live here from the Destiny farm, and it was almost canceled again tonight because of rain that could have turned into a thunder shower. It got pretty heavy, but the skies have cleared up for us tonight. Yeah, that was the issue the past few weeks. So, without further ado, let's just jump into a brief summary paraphrase of the movie The Good Lie. So, for anyone who hasn't watched this, spoiler alert, of course. So, The Good Lie, it follows the story of the Lost Boys, the Lost Boys from Sudan. And it isn't just boys, for context. Basically, there's a number of kids from Sudan where their village was pillaged and they were on their own to fend for themselves. And there was nowhere really to go but to leave because of the extreme circumstances that, murder. Their village was set on fire, essentially, to put it super simple without going into all the gore of that, but extensively so. So there was no choice but to move, move in a way, for your survival out of there. And there was a number of them. Number of them were family, like direct family, related brothers, sisters. There was a few other kids as well, and they had to just keep going, moving, and they encountered other villages that were being pillaged along the way. And so they were encountering like the military, which was trying to kill them or take them in as a hostage like thing. And so they were like deep into this, survival mentality, and that they had to just keep moving, keep going. And there was a lot of close calls along the way. Some of the kids did not make it all the way, but there was a number of them that essentially traveled over 1,000 kilometers by foot. I don't have the exact number on the top of my head at the moment, but yeah, it was well over 1,000 kilometers. I think it was closer to 2,000 kilometers, if my memory serves me correctly, where they got to essentially this refugee camp where there was a whole lot of people who had faced these traumatic events and were essentially homeless. So there was like this village set up for them. And eventually, the core family here, they got to go to the USA, uh, like refugee status. And there was a whole process within that. And something I didn't tell you along the way on the journey was the older brother basically sacrificed himself for the rest of the family, where another one of them was spotted, and then he diverted their attention and basically, gave himself up so the others could go free and continue on. And they did continue on into America. And then once they got into America, it was like the brothers got to stay together, but then the sister wasn't allowed to stay with the brothers because of some bureaucratic rule about, like the families and how they were taking into people. And so she was in another state separated from her brothers. And that was a whole big ordeal. Pretty traumatic just even coming into America because it was so different than what they were used to in just terms of looking at things and just existing and going for job interviews, at basic jobs, and just the way they were looked at because their world was totally different. And so there's a lot of details within there. And so it continued onward, but there was a push to get the sister back with them, and yada yada yada. Eventually, the end, the sister gets taken in with them. A lady opens up and decides to adopt them and take the sister. And basically, what happened along the way was contact was made with where the brother was, who had been taken hostage a long time back. And so one of the other brothers went down there, and he found him there. He was like in a village of about 100,000, and he wasn't registered essentially in there, so he had to just find him. And he was just so willed and determined that he, went on this tremendous journey, and he found him. And so it was like, okay, to bring him back to America with him. But because he didn't have the paperwork or whatnot, he, essentially wasn't allowed to come. But what the other brother did was, just before they were going through customs, he gives him his paperwork, his documents. He says to him, like, you'll now be called his name, the brother's name, saying that, like, no, you're me, I'm you now. And he's like, what? He's like, dude, like, you've done so much for all of us already. You sacrificed before. It's like my turn to help you. Like, please, like, this is happening. And he tells him like what to do. And so now the other brother gets to see his family, who he hasn't seen for forever. And the other guy is back, stays back. Yeah, so basically that's the super fast gist of what happened in the movie without all of the other details, which are a lot. I definitely recommend anybody watch the movie. Because yeah, it was very well done in showcasing just even so many of the dynamics within the world system, in terms of like how the economy exists and structure, jobs, and with regards to immigration and going through borders, and also just what happens in third world countries versus what happens in first world countries. So there's like a lot of points that opened up within the movie. An awesome quote that came at the end of the movie was this, and it really encompasses the whole movie so well. And it's a proverb. The proverb is this: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And yeah, so Yogan, is there anything you would like to add on to my somewhat long description of the movie?
I think you get the basic, the basic gist of it, and that I think it's enough where it's not spoiled enough where people can still watch it. There's a lot of fun moments that are also funny as well.
Totally.
But,
like the chicken joke. That's all. That's all we'll say about the joke, everyone. There's a very good chicken cross the road joke, and it comes back more than once. It's so well timed. Like, it's just the build up, the timing is just on point. And you might be thinking, what are you talking about? Chicken cross the road joke? Like,
you have to watch the movie now because you just heard this. It's that good.
For that joke alone, it's worth watching the movie. But obviously, yeah, there's so much more to it. So, Yogan, a point you mentioned with me before, and really, I think why your interest was coming on the Hangout here was really to discuss that proverb there.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's just. I was just gonna say, let's just say the proverb one more time, so everybody can let that really sink in. So yeah, let me say it here. Everybody ready? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Okay, Yogan. Yeah, just jump into it.
So for me, that was a really like the deep point from the movie. I mean, I really enjoyed the movie up to that point, but then when I saw that proverb and I read it, I realized that kind of described the movie in a way that I really didn't realize. And personally, for me, during the time period that I was watching that movie, it meant a lot because I was looking at, okay, well, how are we going to change the world? How are things going to change? And, even more than that, but that's where it started with, where when you have like a group of people, you know, that's when change really, you know, it's like, you know, that teamwork in a way, like when you're playing a sport, for example, there's just such a big difference if you're playing as a team, you know, versus trying to beat another team by yourself, for example. Or, and it goes even farther than just, let's say, like success on like accomplishing some goal. It also goes much deeper into our relationships, where we learn from each other, where we interact with one another, where we challenge each other, we grow from that interaction, that relationship. So, you know, throughout this movie, it was kind of, let's say, went through the darkest points where in the beginning you have like war, like the actual reality of war, where everyone you know like dies, and like the actual horror of that, you're being hunted, you know. So then it goes from that point where, you know, like a group of people, they form close together, um, but then, you know, and of course they form that bond there, you know, probably through that hardship, but you know, from there they support each other. There's a growth from there. There's a stability from there. There's um, and you know, there's like a point of also like sacrifice, where you do sacrifice for another person, not from a point of, let's say, ego, but just seeing like what's practical, where you see that another person, that they would benefit from doing this decision, and you would still be okay and well off in making this decision, where it's not like you're compromising yourself, but you see that you can fit well. Well, what I'm talking about in this movie is where the younger brother, he decided to stay in Sudan to be a doctor there, which he can do. It's practical, and to have his brother go back to the USA instead of him. So, you know, because he doesn't have much chance there in USA as a chancer. So there's a recognition there where, and that's like the title of the movie, where um, the good lie, a good lie, or because he had to lie in order to get his brother back, or get his brother into the USA. And that's a good lie, because it's what's best for all. It's best for the brother. It's best for him. He's able to still, you know, do his purpose, which is be a doctor. So there's a lot of good things come from being in a group, and yeah, let's.
In a lot of ways, you know, like that point we bring up, and I brought it up in just even the introduction explanation of the movie about sacrifice, and you know, what is like a sacrifice. When you really embody that point of what's best for all, you know, like to consider yourself as everything here, and stand one and equal with your peers, your mates, your siblings, everyone. It isn't really a sacrifice at all. You know, it's kind of only a sacrifice in the sense of looking within your own frame of mind in just consideration of only yourself, because you're doing a deed, you know, making a decision to act in a way that considers other beings as well. And the way, you know, we exist like in our own head, is very much alone, as it's just like you yourself. And to think outside of that is kind of like an outside the box way of living in so many regards, because you know how we've been conditioned so much so is that like, oh well, that's, you know, it's like a sacrifice, like he gave up doing his thing or whatever. But really, like the best version of yourself, your best potential version of yourself here is doing the greatest things. And there's a certain strength of regard in having the capacity to be able to respond in such a way. I mean, because that way of response is just so great in so many ways. Like there's so many dimensions to it. So, you know, if anything, it's I'm seeing that here clearly as a point of strength of character, as standing grounded within yourself to actually look at things and assess the situation in such a way where it is about so much more than just you here in this world. Well, I mean, we could go into the word you there, and like, what is you within this greater understanding context? You know, it's seeing the you as me as you, all together here. And what's fascinating in this movie, just about that proverb, going back to the proverb, you know, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go together, or if you want to go far, go together. Because we see, like for instance, in the movie where, okay, but they all did this big long journey together. You know, they wouldn't have made it on their own that far because they needed to move together as one as the group, because there was just such tremendous support in that way. But later on, when the one brother goes back alone to get the other brother in, it wasn't the same kind of journey. It's like, yes, he covered some land, but in terms of like the steps he had to take to cover that land, because he was able to take a plane and move, he was able to go alone and thus go fast. And in a way, it wasn't as far because, yeah, if you just look at the movements he had to take, and you know, it wouldn't have been practical for all of them to go. In fact, that could have caused like some serious hiccups, like at the border and whatnot. So you know, it brings up points in process here, like we're all walking together, and yet at the same time we're all walking alone. You know, alone together here, all as one, because each has the self-responsibility to take regard for their own mind, how they process information, because each is in the process here together. And you know, you can't, well, you can tell people to do all sorts of things, but for someone to really understand something, like they got it within them all the way, they we have to make that, we have to solidify that connection for ourselves. Like somebody can show you the way to the door, but if you don't go through the door yourself, you didn't really get it the whole way through because you didn't do that movement.
I see another dimension. I can add on to that. Where, like, if you're, let's say you're walking somewhere, right? And each person, like you're walking with a group of people, right? So you're walking with a group of people, and each person, of course, can walk at different paces. Some walk faster, some walk slower. And so, you know, potentially, you know, let's say you're one of the faster ones. You could go by yourself, go faster, have the group, and sort of leave the group behind. Because you know, there's a point there where you don't want to go slow, you want to go faster, you don't want to go slower with the group. And so within that point, that's sometimes where people, they want to go on their own. Like they don't want to deal with all the, maybe the burdens or the sacrifices that they're perceiving, and that, you know, all that. Where it's at really that point when you go slower with a group of people, when you actually, and there's the whole point is also within Desteni, the principle of slowing down, where you kind of just walk with what is here right now, with who is here right now. And you know, if you really want to go farther together, you really need the support of others. Maybe you don't need that support of them making you go faster because you're already fast, but there's other things involved, like that different skills and different abilities or different points to yourself. And there's, if it's like a physical thing, you know, they could be carrying supplies or whatever. It's like there's a lot of involved within that. So there's that point there where the individual wants to fight a group.
That,
Yeah.
that's a great point, Yogan. To add on to that, something that's opened up for me, I'm seeing here right now,
Yeah.
is just look at, you know, the whole world of, let's say, all us humans here on the planet, and we have so many different groups, you know, where people form group here, group here, group here, and many groups create conflict with one another because it's like, oh, you're in this group or you're in this group, or we don't support this group, or we don't know what that group is, or this group is that and we don't stand for that or that. And what can get missed within that is really seeing the big picture of it all, is that we're all here together ultimately as this one giant group. And really, to have the best creative collaboration, there's got to be that like starting point connection in as the realization of, you know, oneness and equality. Like we're all equally one here, and it's kind of fascinating because it's like an intellectual point in a lot of ways, like wherever you are, you know, where it's like, oh, you know, I'm sick and tired of these people now because they're this, or, you know, you regard yourself as superior to them now and you're moving on, you're evolving, and they're still back here. But within that, there's a lot missed because it's like they're you in another life, and you're thinking like you're racing to some faraway place to ascend, when, you know, let's say there is this point of ascension, let's call it. But the kicker on this ascension is that ascension, this elevation, only works if we all hold hands together to elevate, because otherwise there's like a missing link in the chain, and everyone's a part of that chain. And it's fascinating because if you look at that, that's like the world we have here is just war, conflict in so many ways, and it's just based on particular bits of information, as like, oh, you think this about this, or you said this about this, and that offends me or that, and then it's like, oh, okay, like maybe you want to work through the information with each other for a little bit, or it becomes too much and it's like, oh no, we can't deal with them now. And so then maybe this group gets bigger, and then that group gets bigger, and then there's another group that forms out of that group, and now there's a third group, and then there's a fourth one. And you know, depending on how the communications go within each of those group, I mean, there can be viruses spreading where basically what happens is shit just keeps splitting and breaking, where it's because of one point and one point only, really. It's trust. When there's like a refusal to trust in another, there's a dissonance created, and it can have an effect where others leech onto that. Okay, I'm going to trust them now, I'm not trusting them, and then it just creates poison essentially, because people choose to become decided as like, I'm on this side or this side, and that's my decision. And then, you know, it's justified, it's logified. Yes, I said logified. That is a word I made up, as how we see our logic. You know, it's if wide, if I'd, because the I in it as my logic. So logified. We create these elaborate reasons as to like why it must be this separation, and that's, I've come to see, as like the very, you know, guise of our own delusion in a way, because we separate ourselves from them and just basically go into some form of superiority inferiority, where it's like, no, like they're they're not part of it, the club anymore, or making even a club, when just the whole point of clubs even, or groups, is just to gather in communication and point of support for one another. It's not even like that the group is this thing that's separate from anyone else. Like, kind of just by being here in a way, we're all a part of all the groups, whether you're in that group or not, because that's you in another life standing in and as that group. So to create like, or fuel this like energy, like this war about like, oh, them or them, is pretty ridiculous. Yeah. Anything open up
Yeah.
for you, Yogan, in hearing me go on that?
Yeah, it's just the point of everyone. Like,
Hmm.
that's the point of what's best for all. The all being everyone, and we're one group.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you know, to even have such consideration, or to open that up as a, you know, like a thought that you're going to look at, or you're going to write about, or you're going to, you know, question or investigate for yourself in the relationships that are, I'd say it would probably be easiest with the ones that are most immediate in your world. Um, it's a pretty big perspective. I mean, like, everyone, all one here, that's, you know, that encompasses everything. I mean, to count up everything, that's, well, I haven't deducted a number per se. You know, it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Da, 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 da. I mean, I think that would take a long time. But you know, with that regard and consideration, it's kind of like you shortcut that in a lot of ways, because you're always open to realizing yourself as that, as another part, another piece of you. So yeah, it's quite fascinating in so many ways. Because, okay, one more thing, and I'll let you say something. Just how the world is structured is, you know, based on putting up these lines here. No, people can't cross this line unless you have your special papers or this or that, and the views over here are so radical in comparison to these views, when it's pretty ridiculous, because it's so out of sync with our best, you know, as what's best for everyone. It's like we're creating all this extra work, all this extra labor, all this unnecessary communication, because we've decided to accept separation in our communications. And so then it's like, oh, we have to talk about all these separations. And then it's like, oh, well, we don't want to talk about that, or we don't want to talk about that, or let's not go into that because there's a lot to talk about here. So then it's like we create distractions for ourselves, which is the point of our own individual self-interest as like separate from everybody else. Is like, well, if everybody can just live their self-interest, then it's fine. We'll just all just do our own thing. But if there's no regard for like the total of everything here, and each being that part of everything, then we're really creating a lot of unnecessary consequence for everyone, everything here.
This point came up of the innocence, where within the movie, all the, let's say, the Lost Boys, all the people who went through the tragedy of Sudan, the characters in the movie, how they acted, how they were being. And very interesting thing is that at the end of the movie, I find out that all the people who were casted as the people were actually related in some way to the disasters from Sudan or in some civil war, which I didn't realize. So, you know, either they went through it themselves, they were actual child soldiers, they were, or whatever the situation was. At the end of the movie, they showed their pictures and where they came from. So yeah, so that was really interesting that they actually cast those people, because they actually could, let's say, act or how they actually were when they first came to the United States. You know, which was like this point of innocence, of everything being so new and everything in a way being so wonderful. And there was that scene where they were thanking God for the miracle pizza, because that's the first time they ever had pizza. And you know, I remember as a child, like, first time eating pizza and everything being the most amazing thing ever, and you know, having that experience where everything is new and so great. And they really put things into perspective as well, and how lucky people are here in the United States or in other countries that are more, let's say, developed, like Europe or wherever. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of great things here, and to see them being in that environment, people who went through absolute tragedy, having very little, to having, you know, so much. But for us, you know, if you're from the United States or, you know, Canada or whatever, it's like we have a whole different perspective of things. And in the movie too, they have those characters, which were the lady who's working for the job employment agency, who helped the people, the group, to find jobs. How they have a whole different perspective, which gives the perspective of what we probably would see if we saw someone acting this way, which is so innocent and lacking experience in, let's say, this industrialized country. So that's, for me, that shows a lot about the separation and the points where, you know, we're on this one earth and all these things are happening all the time. It's not like this stuff happened in Sudan, Civil War, you know, that was it. Like, there's still things happening all the time like that. So there are people who are in the situations, who are in situations where they are going through horrors and tragedies, and they, and and just that innocence there, where um, there's a lot that could be done and fixed, where they obviously, such people, they want to live, they want to contribute, let's say, they want to be part of society. And I don't see the problem of, let's say, the economy being only like, okay, just like where are the jobs. It's more like, as long as there are people willing to work, then you can always build a society, you can always build life for everyone. So yeah, I see that potential there.
Totally. I mean, that's a very interesting perspective, just with the point of regard from coming from one area to another area and seeing things in a different way, because the environment, the culture there has different, customs, basic points of operation, shall we say. And yeah, that is a very cool point where, you see them go into it and they're just so happy to be here. I mean, imagine that as the attitude everyone had about being on this planet. I mean, obviously within the circumstances we have here now, it depending where you're born is in a lot of ways like a lotto ticket, because yeah, a lot of people are born into some serious shit. But like we see in the movie, these guys that are born, into the thick of it, like basically a worst case scenario. Like there's been a number of viral videos on Facebook about people challenging each other to do, what's your worst case scenario? And this movie depicts a very real worst case scenario that, you wouldn't wish upon anyone. And what do we see like out of it? It's a great textbook example of how, okay, you breathe, like, what's my best response able ability here? It's like, oh shit, like this house is on fire. Like, okay, can I get to the door? Can I get out of it? Can I pull my brother out? Well, yeah, let's do that. That's the best move here. I don't want to get burned. And so it's from like a survival point, but also it's also equal that point of self-regard there, because you're in a situation and it's like, well, how do I make the best of the situation? And to have the capacity, when you're in the thick of it, to consider others outside of yourself is really, a strong mark of character. So yeah, I mean, these guys walk an extensive process, and despite having been through such trauma, you can say, they, you know, they live, they move together. And I mean, you see the one brother who kind of dipped off a little bit, where he kind of went into a bit of a suppression within the drugs, because it was like a point of, escaping his shit, but he didn't at the same time really understand it. And so, it was kind of innocent, because I mean, he wasn't really educated about it. And so, yeah, taking the drugs there like felt good, and he was losing himself within that. And his brothers were, a really kind of cool example about him there. I mean, they didn't know the extent of it, but it was kind of like there was a trust in that relationship there. It was like, okay, buddy's kind of like fucking up, fucking around. It's like, let him go, like let him do his thing, have the trust. It's like, he'll come back. And maybe he won't. It's like that point of being willing to let go, and maybe the person doesn't come back, but to leave the decision into the person and not try to influence or like steer someone a certain way for the sake of wanting to manage and control the being, but leaving the being up to his very own directive. And yeah, I think that's a cool example of how to exist, really. Yeah. I mean, I can continue to elaborate on that point, because I mean, there's so much there on that point. I mean, what comes up for me is the point of parenting. In this world, you know, I can take my house, I can take the many parents I've seen raising their children. There's an often common theme where you have to manage and control your child. And it's so often based on like the fear of like, oh, if I don't manage and control them, like suppress them in this way or another way, my child's going to be fucked for life. And ironically, that fear resonance manifests as consequence onto your child. It's like what you don't want within that fear-based starting point of how you're speaking and acting for your child has consequence. And you know, it's a perfect example of why everything is so fucked up in this world. It starts at the home, you know, in the immediate family, and how we're brought up in so many ways, because it's like managing and controlling. And now we take it outside of the family and we look at the bigger picture, like look at your city, you know, how it's managed and controlled. It's like, okay, let's expand outside of your city into your province or state, managed and controlled, based on the point that, you know, you don't know any better, and so you have to be managed and controlled. Then let's look at an even bigger picture. Let's take it by country, managed and controlled. And then let's take it even bigger and look at how countries correlate with one another, managed and controlled. It's like the big dick, little dick syndrome. It's like managed, controlled. And it's an extensive outflow of fear, false evidence appearing real. And it's due to lack of understanding, not really investigating, and getting caught up in the information, and therefore being possessed within as your own information is how you move about. It's really quite fascinating here when we consider such things, because it's like this whole world is bits of information. You know, you take one of these little tiny pieces of my hair, and it's information in there. You know, it's got it all, and everything's got it all. So yeah, all together as one. Okay, Yogan, that's wow. I've said a lot there within that. Really, yeah.
Yeah, I like how you went into the parenting dimension. That was really cool.
Cool, man. Any final thoughts or final perspectives you'd like to share for anyone watching out there?
I say watch the movie. There's a lot of fun moments, and a lot of funny moments, and a lot of real moments too. A lot of sharing connections together.
Awesome. Yogan, I almost forgot. We have the question and answer box open.
Oh,
and
no.
We have it's not a no. It's quite awesome, in fact, because we have a question. We have a question here from Angzar, and Angzar, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. If I'm not, apologies. Hi, what do you guys think about human spiteful nature on a beingness level? That's a very good question. Okay, I'll take the floor with this question, and then Yogan, you can, or know what? You go first, Yogan.
Yeah. I mean, spitefulness is spitefulness. It is what it is. So why it exists, I consider it just like a program that you pick up and you copy from another person. And I see like a computer program where it's going to activate in exact moments that it was programmed to. So, and within its design, as far as I can tell, it serves as a self-defense mechanism where when the real yourself is being exposed, or a possibility of changing yourself is being exposed, or anything that's like that, where it gets real for you, your spitefulness will come up and defend, let's say defend, so you don't change at all, you don't realize who you are. And so it will attack another person, it will create conflict, and you'll feel right within that, you will feel justified, you'll feel good within that, you'll even feel energized, as if you're being like giving a high experience sort of in a way. So I just see it as something that is like kind of like an excuse or justification that limits us from growing, from understanding, from communicating, from expanding ourselves. Yeah.
Cool, Yogan. Cool, Yogan. Yeah, so to read the question again for anybody watching who forgot what the question was, what do you guys think about a human's spiteful nature on a beingness level? So, at the beingness level, like to the core, connected with how you see things through your mind, and thus how you're living it through your physical body. It's like your words, and your words are manifested in thoughts and actions and feelings and emotions. And so I see why it in fact happens. It's a matter of education, understanding, awareness. And there's a huge cognitive dissonance there. And what I mean by that is separation, where all is not connected, all together is all is one. You could take the analogy of Humpty Dumpty, and Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and the pieces are scattered all over, yet everywhere you look is a piece and a part of yourself. Like you're it. It's you in another form, as bits of information put together within it as the same substance, which is yourself. And so, speaking of like the human condition, so much so, we're birthed into this world and the process is quite extensive, really, if you think about it, because who you are, there's a lot to it in the makeup design of your past generations, your genes and whatnot. But within that, I think even more importantly so, and studies have showed this, is that how you learn and how you will develop is as your environment. So, the extent of harmony or disharmony that exists in your, initially very closed world, because for the most people, it's a very small bubble as a child, and it's important for the child to be nurtured, cared for, all of that. And when there's misalignments within the beings that are in that child's world, that manifests within the child as like the child taking that on too. So yeah, I mean, it's an extensive point, but I mean, each person, has the capacity to move past it. And so the challenge here, big time, I see, is a matter of patience. If you don't live patience, you become your own fucking worst mental patient. And it's glossed with a whole conglomerate of characters that can come out in and as your reactionary response to someone that's spiteful to you, where you feel the need to defend yourself because you're feeling attacked by them based on what they said and how they're existing within their information, and not seeing that as cool, but then you go into the energy of it also on some level, and thus you're spitting it back, and it's like this bad ripple effect that happens when we exist here. Because if we look at a real simple point of how we exist here, how everything exists here, it's a sound. What is anything that's built? Structured sound. Like that is what is physical here. And within that, mind beingness connection as well. So that's the kind of the point of direction within it as the physical. And if there's misalignments within your very own like sounds as the words having particular charges, there's going to be an off balance happening there, where it creates the riff as things being decided this way or that way when it's not all together in form as like one form here. Yeah, I mean, that opens up a whole lot. So Angzar, thank you very much for the question. And yeah, awesome that you took the initiative to open that up. That was a great question. Very much appreciated that. And there can totally be more discussion on that point at the Destiny forums, and totally welcome you to come into the forums if you haven't already been to them. Pardon me, that was slightly a sloppy sentence I spewed out there. Okay, Yogan, thank you very much for the hangout here tonight.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, everyone, we'll bid you a farewell. And the hangout happened. And until next time, stay tuned. Cheers.